weeks ago. And
Yeah.
Okay, no, do I.
Oh, no.
Sorry.
Okay,
Sorry.
great.
Go ahead.
All right. Well, today we're going to talk about KPIs and what KPIs are. KPIs are key performance indicators, and they're key because these are a measure of a critical measurement of a data point that you need to understand and for the health of your business.
So these are going to be different for every business, and it can even be different depending on your campaign, your advertising campaign, and it's going to be things that you're wanting to measure based on those goals that you have, either for your business as a whole or for those individual campaigns.
So why are KPIs important? They're a measurement tool for how effective your marketing efforts are. And you need both short-term and long-term KPIs to really understand how well your marketing is doing. Because if you aren't measuring your marketing efforts, then basically you're wasting time, money, and effort.
Exactly. So, what can KPIs tell you? Well, they can tell you what is and isn't working. And one of the things you want to look for is not just how well something's working or how poorly something's working, but if there's any discrepancies. So, for example, if within one specific campaign, you have like really, really high engagement, but really, really low conversions, that discrepancy there can tell you something about your marketing, or vice versa. If you have really low engagement, but really, really high conversions, that's going to tell you something different. So those kind of discrepancies within your KPIs, that's something you should be looking for to tell you different things about your marketing and what's working.
Yeah. So that's a brief introduction to KPIs. What we're going to work on now is an exercise to figure out what your KPIs are. So I'd like for you to think about, what are your KPIs? What are the most important things for you to measure in your business? How are you measuring them? What's the data point there? So think about a goal that you have in your business, and then find data points for that you can measure the progress there. So if your goal is, we're going to use Felicia at Esonis as an example. Esonis has the goal of getting clients from webinars. So if the goal is to get clients from webinars, then you want to think about a KPI will be how many people attend a webinar, how many people schedule phone calls after the webinar, and then from those phone calls, what's the conversion rate? So think about that goal that you have. Think about what data point from there that you can measure. And then think about this for every campaign that you have, every marketing campaign that you have, every product that you have, and think about the KPIs for each of those.
Mm-hmm. So if you're a very, very small business and you're just starting out, one of your campaigns might not necessarily be conversions, but it could be even just people coming onto your website from an organic marketing standpoint. So let's say you put out a post just organically, not necessarily in a paid advertising campaign. You might be looking at the number of likes you get on your post. You might be looking at the number of comments you get on your post. You might be looking at the number of website visits you get after you have made that post, depending on your calls to action. So that's why we say those KPIs are going to be different for every business, for every campaign. So your organic marketing is going to look different than your paid marketing, because with your advertising, your calls to action are going to be very different. So that's going to look like, let's say, with your paid advertising, just having high engagement on a paid ad, well, that's not going to do anything for you, right? You don't want high engagement on something that you're paying for, because when you're trying to get people to purchase your product. So that's why your KPIs need to not just support your business goals, but each campaign needs to have different KPIs specific to that campaign as well.
Any questions?
Can you choose a bad KPI?
You can, yeah. You can. So you want to be mindful about which KPIs that you choose. So in Shireen's example of an ad, you might look at your ad and think your KPI is number of likes on the ad, and think that is a good engagement or a good measure of the ad's success. When in reality, the people are clicking like on that ad, but they're not actually clicking through and making a purchase. So it is possible to choose a bad KPI. So make sure you're actually measuring what you want your final results to be.
With that same thought too, something that might be not necessarily a bad KPI, But a KPI that is telling you something about your campaign that is good to know, but also isn't a good measurement of success. People are clicking on your ad, but then not converting. So your click rate is really high, but your conversions are really low. That's still a good KPI to be watching.
Still tells you
And
something.
it still tells you something. Exactly. It's still telling you something. Your ad is performing well. It's getting in front of people. It's getting people interested, but then they're landing on your page, and either the marketing's not
maybe the messaging on the page
yeah.
isn't right, or what's happening is the ad isn't getting in front of the right people. So those people are clicking through and then finding that the message on the page isn't for them.
Exactly. So that has to do with, that tells you a lot about your marketing. Like Chrisella said, it's not the right audience, so maybe you need to change your audience, or maybe it is the right audience and your landing page just isn't capturing them in the way that you're hoping. So it is good to keep those things. That's one of the discrepancies that I was talking about in what your KPIs can tell you. And that's why it's also really important to not just put a post out there and just let it run and not be paying attention to it, because it could be running and you could be spending a lot of money on it. And then if you're not watching it, if you're not paying attention to what it's doing, you're wasting money and not getting what you're hoping out of it. So you do have to pay attention to those things.
Well, and like, I look at, so I know we look at our financials as business owners, right?
Yeah.
But I kind of use the analogy of, you could put your money in the stock market and go, okay, it goes like this or this, or you're a day trader. Like, I don't want to be a day trader looking at my KPIs like, oh my, every
Exactly.
Right.
And so I guess there's kind of a sweet spot for that.
Yeah. There is a good balance.
Yeah. And so that's why we were saying there can be short-term KPIs as well as long-term KPIs, and you want to make sure that you're not looking at your long-term KPIs and thinking, oh my gosh, why aren't they changing day to day sort of thing. Your short-term KPIs are going to be different than that.
Yeah. And so again, it's going to be different for every business. We say a good rule of thumb is when you're testing audiences, test with maybe like 7 to 14 days as you test those audiences to see how something's working. For your full campaigns, let them run for at least a month before you make any really big decisions. But 3 to 6 months is a good general rule to start building up those audiences and to be building those campaigns. One of the things we always say is like it takes 6 months to really build and nurture audiences. So you should be thinking very long term as well in when you're thinking about your marketing goals. So if you know you have something coming for the end of the year, you need to be looking at things starting in June, July. You need to be starting your, like, for example, if you own a product-based business and you know you're going to be doing really big end-of-year sales or Christmas sales, end of like Thanksgiving Day sales, things like that. You're going to want to start nurturing and building those audiences in June and July for your end of year, because if you're starting with a cold audience for Black Friday, you're not going to get nearly the results.
It's going to be expensive.
It's going to be very expensive, and you're not going to get nearly the results you could be getting if you started nurturing those earlier.
That's really good.
Okay, great.
It's like, I don't understand those fashion buyers. I mean, they've got to know a year ahead with the colors and the trends.
Exactly. So marketing is going to be, there are short-term things, but it is very forward-thinking.
Okay.
Thanks.
That's KPIs.
KPIs.
Thank you.